The funeral was quiet. People were dressed in white. The room was filled with soft sobs and whispered prayers. A large photo of Mr. Rashid stood at the front decorated with flowers. He was a rich and powerful man, known by many, respected by all. Family members sat in the front row. Business partners and close friends filled the hall. Everyone spoke about Mr. Rashid's success. He built his empire from nothing. He helped so many people. He was a great man. But in the last row near the wall stood an old woman. Her clothes were simple. Her hands were shaking. She held a small purse and a folded piece of paper. Her name was Zulekha. Most people didn't notice her. Those who did stared. Who is she? She doesn't belong here. Maybe she came for the free food. Even Rashid's daughter whispered to her aunt, "Why is that old woman here? She's not family." Zulekha stood quietly. She looked at Rashid's photo and blinked back tears. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't speak. But there was pain in her eyes, pain deeper than anyone else in the room. As the prayer ended, the crowd started to stand and leave. People were preparing for the final burial. That's when Zulekha slowly stepped forward. The hall quieted down. She walked toward the family. Some people frowned. The daughter stepped back and said coldly, "This isn't the time or place." Zulekha looked at her calmly, then turned to the people and said in a clear, steady voice, "Before you bury Mr. Rashid, you should hear the truth, a truth he never told you, a truth he left for me to share." Everyone froze. The whispers started again. Who is she? What truth? Zulekha opened her purse and took out a small sealed envelope. She raised it in her hand and said, "This letter is from Rashid. He gave it to me before he died. He told me to open it only after his funeral prayer." A man from the family laughed. "Why would my uncle give a letter to you?" Zulekha looked at him and replied softly, "Because once, many years ago, I gave him something that no one else did. Hope." The room fell silent again. Zulekha continued, "You all know Rashid as a great man, a businessman, a leader. But I knew him before all this, when he was lost, when he was broken, and when no one believed in him." She held the letter close to her heart. "I don't want his money. I don't want his name. I came here to tell you who he really was before the world saw him as a hero." The lawyer who managed Rashid's estate stepped forward. He looked at the envelope in Zulekha's hand. His eyes widened. This is his handwriting," the lawyer said. He gently took the letter from Zulekha and checked the seal. "It's real. This is part of his will. I didn't know about it, but it's here." The family looked confused. Some looked angry, others were nervous. The daughter shouted, "This is nonsense! We've never heard of her. This is some scam." But the lawyer raised his hand. "Mr. Rashid gave this woman something important. We must hear it." Zulekha stepped back, letting the lawyer read the letter aloud. But before he opened it, she looked at the people once more and said, "You all looked down on me today. You judged me by my clothes, my silence, my age. But after you hear what Rashid wrote, you will never look at me the same way again." And with that, she turned and sat quietly on a chair at the back. The envelope shook in the lawyer's hand. He opened it slowly. Everyone leaned forward, even the ones who had ignored her before. Because now the funeral had turned into something else. Something no one expected. A hidden truth was about to change everything. The letter was still unopened. The lawyer held it tightly, afraid of what was inside. People around him waited quietly. The atmosphere had changed. This was no longer just a funeral. This was a mystery, and Zulekha was at the center of it. But before the letter could be read, Zulekha spoke again. Her voice was soft, but it reached every corner of the room. "Before the words in that letter are heard, let me take you back. many years ago, to a time when Rashid was not powerful, not respected, not rich, just a boy, lost and lonely. The screen of memory opened in her mind. He was only 17, she said. I was a school teacher. My name was Miss Zuleka. Then, Rashid was my student. Flashback begins. The school was small, in an old part of the city. Most students came from poor families. But Rashid was different. His father owned shops, lands, and had high dreams for his son, but Rashid was not doing well. He sat alone in class. He rarely spoke. His eyes were always tired. One day after class, Zuleka called him. Rashid, are you okay? She asked. He looked away. I don't want to study anymore, he said. My mother is sick. My father doesn't care. I feel broken. Zuleka's heart ached. She saw pain in his eyes, pain that no one else noticed. From that day, she began to help him secretly. She gave him extra time after class. She bought him notebooks from her own salary. She gave him food when he came hungry, but most of all, she gave him hope. You are not weak, Rashid, she told him. You are just hurt. But one day you will rise. And when that day comes, help someone like I helped you. He smiled for the first time in months. Days turned into weeks. Rashid began to change. He studied harder. He smiled more. He started dreaming again. At the end of the year, he came to her with tears in his eyes. Miss Zuleka, he said, you saved me. I will never forget you. She smiled and patted his head. I don't want anything in return, she said. Just become a good man. That is enough. But he held her hand and said something she never forgot. One day, the world will know. You saved me, I promise. Back to the present. Tears rolled down Zuleka's face as she finished her story. He left school after that. I heard he moved to another city. I never saw him again. But I remembered his promise. She looked down at her old hands. For years, I lived a simple life. Never married, never became rich. But I never stopped praying for him. Gasps were heard in the crowd. A few people looked ashamed. Rashid's daughter was quiet now. The lawyer looked at Zuleka with deep respect. This is not just a story, he said. This is love. A teacher's love. A mother's love. He raised the letter. Now, it's time to read what Rashid wrote, and what he wanted the world to know after his death. But before he opened it, Zuleka whispered, I don't want anything from him now. I only want you to know he was once a broken boy, and I helped him stand. The hall was silent. Everyone listened. Everyone watched. The woman they had ignored now held everyone's heart. The air in the hall was heavy. Nobody moved. All eyes were on the old woman, Zuleka. She stood with calm eyes, though her hands trembled a little. Everyone now knew who she was. But the biggest truth was still waiting inside that letter. The lawyer was about to open it. But before he could, Zuleka spoke again. Let me tell you what happened after he left. After Rashid walked out of my classroom and into the world. Flashback begins. After Rashid moved to the city, Zuleka heard many things. He got into a good college. He started a small business. He worked hard. Zuleka was proud. Every time someone spoke about a successful businessman named Rashid, she smiled quietly and said to herself, that's my student. She waited for a message, a visit, anything. But years passed, and Rashid never came. He never wrote, never called. People around her laughed. You really think he'll come back? Why would a rich man remember a poor teacher? Zuleka didn't reply. She just waited. Even when she got sick, even when she had no money, she kept a small chair near the window, just in case Rashid ever came to visit. One cold winter night, she cried for the first time in years. Maybe he forgot me. Maybe promises are easy to say but hard to keep. But the next morning, something strange happened. A young boy came to her door with an envelope. "No name, no address," he said. "Someone told me to give this to you." Zuleika took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside it was a simple note, written in familiar handwriting. It said, "I haven't forgotten you. When I die, the truth will come out. Rashid." That was it. No explanation, no phone number, no signature, just that one line. She read it over and over again. "When I die, the truth will come out." What did it mean? Why not now? Why wait? But Zuleika understood one thing. He remembered. And maybe, just maybe, he was planning something. Back to the present, Zuleika wiped a tear from her cheek and said, "For years, I lived with nothing. No money, no help. But I held on to that letter. I believed he would keep his promise. Maybe not in life, but in death." The lawyer looked down at the letter in his hand. "This is that promise," he said softly. He opened the envelope. People leaned forward. The family looked nervous. He unfolded the paper and began to read Rashid's words aloud. "To everyone, I leave behind. There is a woman among you today. Her name is Zuleika. You may not know her, but she knew me when I was nobody. When I was broken, she gave me strength. When I was lost, she showed me the way. Everything I became because of her." Gasps were heard. The lawyer continued reading. "I failed her. I disappeared from her life. I let her suffer. I was busy building my empire. But I forgot the one who helped me stand. I lived with guilt." Zuleika closed her eyes. The lawyer's voice grew quiet. "Now, after my death, I want the truth to come out. She was not just my teacher. She was my second mother, and she deserves everything I have." Silence. Tears. Some family members looked down in shame. Rashid's daughter covered her face. The same woman they laughed at, insulted, and ignored was the reason their father became who he was. Zuleika looked at the ground. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "He kept his promise, even if it was too late." The room was silent. The lawyer held the letter in his hand. His voice had stopped, but the words still echoed in everyone's mind. "She was my second mother. She deserves everything I have." No one knew what to say. Zuleika sat on the edge of her chair. Her back was straight, her face calm. But inside, her heart beat fast. This was the moment she had waited for years. The same people who had looked at her with hate now looked at her with guilt. Rashid's daughter stood up. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Zuleika with eyes full of pain. I'm sorry," she whispered. "We didn't know. We were wrong." Zuleika nodded gently but said nothing. One of Rashid's nephews came forward, too. "We thought you were here for money," he said. "But you were here for the truth." The lawyer cleared his throat and said, "There's more in the letter." Everyone turned to him. "I have left part of my property in Zuleika's name. This includes a house, a bank account, and shares from my company. She is not a guest today. She is family. And to my family, if you respect me, then respect her. If you love me, then love her. Because without her, I would not be here." A few people in the back began to cry. The strong walls of pride and greed were breaking. Zuleika closed her eyes and said softly, "I never wanted his wealth. I only wanted his words, his memory." The lawyer looked at her kindly. "Sometimes, madam, a single word is heavier than gold." Meanwhile, outside the hall, news had spread. People outside the building were whispering. Did you hear? A poor teacher saved Rashid's life. She's the reason he became successful. She was nothing, and now she's everything. Some journalists had arrived. One of them tried to enter but was stopped by guards. Still, the story had already begun to travel like fire. The unknown woman who held a millionaire's heart. Back inside. Zuleka stood up. She looked at the photo of Rashid at the front of the room. He was smiling in the picture. I forgive you, Rashid, she said softly. You broke your promise in life, but you kept it in death. And that is enough. The lawyer stepped beside her and said, There's one last thing. He opened a second envelope. It was marked, for Zuleka only. He handed it to her gently. Zuleka took it with both hands. She opened it slowly and read it to herself. Her eyes filled with tears. It said, I'm sorry I stayed away. I thought I would come back one day when I had something to show you. But time passed. Pride stopped me. Guilt followed. And I couldn't face you. But in my heart, you were never far. You were always with me. In every deal, in every success, in every silent prayer. Thank you, Miss Zuleka, for saving me. I will always be your student. Zuleka pressed the letter to her chest. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because now everyone knew. This was not just a teacher. This was the woman behind a great man, and finally, her truth had found its voice. For a few long moments, no one spoke. Zuleka stood quietly, holding Rashid's letter to her chest. Her eyes were filled with tears, but her face showed peace. It was the peace of someone who had waited many years for justice, and finally received it. The lawyer closed his folder. His job was done. But the real change was just beginning. Slowly, one by one, the people who had once ignored her began walking up to her. A young woman, Rashid's niece, held Zuleka's hand and said, I judged you, and I was wrong. You gave our uncle something. We never could. You gave him love without expecting anything. Zuleka smiled gently. I only did what any teacher should do. I believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. An older man, one of Rashid's cousins, looked ashamed. He said, We only saw the money he had. We never asked who helped him when he had nothing. The mood in the hall was changing. The room that once felt cold and full of pride was now filled with warmth and regret. Outside the hall, the news had spread to the city. Headlines appeared on mobile phones. Millionaire leaves wealth to forgotten teacher. The woman behind the man, Rashid's secret hero. Respect replaces riches at Rashid's funeral. A few media vans were now parked outside, but inside, Zuleka didn't care about the cameras or the noise. She walked slowly toward Rashid's photo. She placed a single white rose in front of it. And then she whispered, Your story is complete now, Rashid. The world knows the truth. Rest in peace. The lawyer stepped forward again. There is one more detail in the will, he said. Mr. Rashid has named Zuleka as the head of a new education trust he started secretly last year. People looked at each other, surprised. He continued, It will help poor children, those who cannot afford school. Rashid wanted Zuleka to lead it because he said, She is the only person I trust to guide them like she guided me. Zuleka's eyes widened. She never expected this. She said, I'm not sure I can handle something so big. But the lawyer smiled. You already did. Years ago, with just your words and kindness, you changed a life. Now, with this trust, you can change many more. The true turning point had arrived. Zuleka was no longer the unknown woman sitting in the last row. She was now the center of the story. The teacher who became the reason behind a legacy. The same people who once judged her were now offering her their hands. The daughter of Rashid came forward again, this time with tears in her eyes. "I wish I knew you earlier," she said. "Maybe my father would have smiled more if you were around." Zuleika gently touched her shoulder. "We all make mistakes," she said, "but it's never too late to be kind." As people left the funeral, no one talked about Rashid's cars, his businesses, or his success. They talked about Zuleika, about her strength, her patience, her quiet power, because in the end, the richest person in the room was not the one who had the most money. It was the one who had the most heart. The funeral was over. The chairs were empty. The flowers had wilted. The guests had gone home. But Zuleika remained. She sat alone in the quiet hall, looking at Rashid's photograph. The smile in the picture now felt more real, more human. The noise, the whispers, the judgment, everything was gone. Now, there was only peace. She stood up slowly and walked toward the stage. The white rose she had placed earlier still lay near. The photo. Zuleika gently touched the frame and whispered, "You finally kept your word, Rashid, and I finally let go of the weight I carried for so many years." Her voice was steady, but her heart was full. She remembered everything: his silence, his success, his broken promise, and now, his final gift. Later that evening, Zuleika returned to her small home. It was the same house she had lived in for decades. The walls were old, the paint was peeling, but it was full of memories. She made herself a simple cup of tea. She sat near the window, the same window where she once waited for Rashid to return. But this time, she wasn't waiting, she was remembering and smiling. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. She opened it to find Rashid's daughter standing there, with her own daughter, a little girl of about 10. "We hope we're not disturbing you," the woman said softly. Zuleika smiled warmly. "Not at all. Please come in." The little girl looked up at her and said, "Mama told me you were Grandpa's favorite teacher." Zuleika knelt and touched the girl's cheek. "I was. And now, maybe I can be your teacher too." The girl's eyes lit up. The three of them sat together, sharing stories, laughter, and tears. It was not a fancy evening, but it was real. For the first time in years, Zuleika didn't feel forgotten. She felt seen. A few days later, the trust in Rashid's name was announced publicly. Zuleika was named as its head. Her picture was in the newspapers. Smiling kindly, standing beside children, people from all over the city sent letters. "Thank you for what you did. We are proud of you. You taught the world something special." Zuleika didn't want fame, but she accepted the respect with quiet grace. She used the trust money carefully. She opened a small school in a poor neighborhood, just like the one Rashid once studied in. Above the door, she placed a sign, the Rashid Foundation. Every child deserves a second chance, one final time. She returned to Rashid's grave. There were no cameras now, no people, just her and the wind. She placed another white rose on the stone. She didn't cry. She didn't speak much. She only said, "Goodbye, my student, thank you for remembering." Then she turned and walked away. Her steps were slow, but strong. The world had finally heard her story. And now, she was ready for a new one. Months had passed since the funeral. The city had moved on. But Zuleika's name was now written in people's hearts. She had become more than just a teacher. She had become a symbol of quiet strength, of patience, of love that expects nothing in return. But Zuleika remained simple. She still lived in the same small house. She still wore the same plain clothes. And she still made tea every evening. Sitting near the window, only one thing had changed. She was no longer alone. The school started under the Rashid Foundation was growing. Every day poor children came there to learn. They came with torn shoes, hungry eyes, but with hope. Zuleka didn't. Just teach them math or reading. She taught them something more. She told them, "You may be poor today, but you are not weak. If you work hard, one day someone will remember your name." The children listened closely. They didn't know everything about her past, but they knew. This woman loved them like a mother, just like she once loved Rashid. One morning, a little boy came running to her with a flower. "Teacher, for you." Zuleka smiled and took the flower gently. "Thank you, my dear." Another child raised his hand and asked, "Miss, can anyone become great? Even someone like me?" She looked at the class and said with soft eyes, "Yes, anyone can become great, but not because of money, because of heart."